was 18. My first job ever was working at a tiny local supermarket, much like the ones I'd been to as a child. I remember running around being chased by my siblings as I sprinted across the polished floors and the squeaks my shoes made every time I turned a corner. Of course, me and my brothers were scolded by our mother, who was first reprimanded by the staff about a couple of kids running around and possibly hurting themselves. I didn't think much of it at the time because it was normal for me. A brightly lit supermarket filled with staff and customers all walking around chatting and scrounging for some savings. Cut back to my first day on the job. It was the middle of January and I was in the middle of a cold snap. I woke up around 4 a.m. and was heading to my new job around 4:30 a.m. When I got there, it was dark and never cold. Even through my jacket and gloves, I could feel the cold seeping through until finally, another coworker was able to lift the gate and open the store for business. Finally, some warmth and light. As we approached and my coworker went for the lights, there was a problem. Try as he might, he couldn't get the lights to work. And I, in turn, stepped into the continuation of even more cold, darkness, and unfamiliarity. As my coworker headed downstairs to check on the circuit breaker, he urged me towards the coffee aisle and to retrieve some coffee for the coffee machine, as a fresh cup of joe would surely warm us up. I, of course, being a coffee addict, obliged him without really thinking much of it. As he headed downstairs, I headed into the aisles. It was pitch black and cold, and yet I still shuffled along, staring at what appeared to be aisles of baby food and oils. I couldn't find this coffee aisle he talked about. I slowly inched even further into the store, and I felt rather alone and uneasy, so desolate and cold. The only thing I could hear was the winds outside. I'm not meant to be here, is what I told myself, and a sense of desperation hit me as I seemed to lose my way between the darkness and aisles, never really being able to find what I was looking for. I stopped in my tracks and listened to the wind to the left of me. But as I turned and squinted, I couldn't see the exit. Am I lost? In this tiny supermarket, I felt like a kid, lost and in need of his parents. In truth, this is what I wanted. I'm not meant to be here. The thought crossed my mind again. I'm not meant to see this. No one here was chatting, no one here was laughing or walking, no children running. It was just still. How are the lights not on yet? Why was my coworker taking so long? Fear washed over me. What if I were to be stuck in here forever? What if I was never found? I tried to take those thoughts out of my head. Surely he would put the lights on soon. But as quickly as the fear set in, a sense of sad relief also set in. The quietness and serenity wasn't so bad. Perhaps I didn't have to work today. And as that thought finished, it concluded with a click, and the lights once again came on. I'm sure most of you have had this feeling as well, this sense of being alone and seeing something you weren't supposed to see, being somewhere where you weren't meant to be, stuck in some sort of purgatory, no beginning and no end. There is a word for it, of course, liminality, relating to a transitional or initial period of process. This feeling I had was quite unique and I didn't really know how to explain it. This type of horror is severely underrated and underappreciated, as it not only occupies most of the internet, but it's also entrenched in your life. Don't forget to drop your own liminal horror stories down in the comments, and while you're at it, give it a like and ring the notification bell. And how? Give it a subscribe, you won't regret it. If you're not careful and no clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the back rooms where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum humbuzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you. I won't lie, this paragraph is quite good. It truly describes the back rooms, but the back rooms is not quite liminal horror. Yes, it is derived from the same 4chan post, but it doesn't encapsulate the horror and nostalgia the liminal horror by itself can accomplish. Although I love the internet for what it did with the concept of the back rooms, it isn't the full picture. Let me enlighten you. I know you can recall a time in your childhood or adolescence when you felt contradictory, when perhaps you felt both empathy and apathy towards a situation, or where you both loved and hated someone or something. I guess you could say I remember feeling these emotions towards the first genre of video games I played, which was horror. I hated being scared. I hated the anticipation. I hated the unfamiliarity, but I loved the sense of accomplishment, the sense of relief, the sense of eventual familiarity. I didn't really know it at the time, but this was the beginning of a very familiar yet unfamiliar set of barriers that I face and still face today. The place I dread, and I know you dread the most as well. The process of completing a task, entering a building, perhaps going to school or getting married. These events or places are very unfamiliar, transitionary, liminal. Tell me, do you want wealth? If you live in the West, I know you do. Let's say we concoct a plan for you and me to become rich. Well, there are only two options. Either we go to school, do well, and get a good job that will eventually give you wealth, or we start a business. We face the ridicule of our peers and the constant nagging and complaining of our parents, the super long hours we would have to put in, and the process of building it up from nothing. How does that sound? Not a fun time, I would bet. Everyone wants the end goal, but the way there is so vast, so scary. Now imagine living in this purgatory of sorts, never having a beginning and never truly needing to get where you need to go. This is what that sense of fear that the Backrooms instills. The process left undone, the bread left half-baked, the unnerving and anxiety-inducing feeling of something not done right or something just not ending. We as humans crave order and meaning, understanding, a purpose of beginning and an end. But that's the thing about the Backrooms. It doesn't end. They're gone forever, and perhaps you could wander around lost in this alien and benign world of a vague memory you might have had until you don't really think at all anymore. But in a sense, this never-ending state of just being is what makes it, well, beautiful. Think back on a moment when you did go through the process of it. Maybe it was a scary movie you sat through, a difficult game you might have completed, finally cleaning your room, finally getting that weight loss. The beginning was bliss, living in your fantasy. The ending, a complete satisfactory. But the middle was just dreadful. The process of it is always the longest and the most work you have to put in. An incomplete version of your dreams or desires. But once you're done, you tend to look back and indeed hate the process, but also in a weird way love and romanticize it. It's something to brag about because, well, you went through it, and it's something to feel nostalgic about because once upon a time you were there. This middle, this process is liminal, a transitionary period meant to be completed and not really paying much mind to it. But in the moment, it's horrifying, something unfamiliar, something you do not want to do but you have to do. An empty school at night, it's incomplete. It's not meant to be in a state, although it exists and you know it exists. It's meant to have children, teachers, lectures, joking and laughing. But now, in the moment, it's silent, dark, and devoid of life. But if you just stop panicking, if you're just okay with just being an observer, a spectator, not meant to truly see it, then you can see the serenity. That's why the Backrooms is therapeutic, nostalgic, and beautiful. On the other hand, we have, well, what is now the Backrooms. It blew up after the found footage video, and well, it's a really good video. I mean, I really liked it. But what it spawned was, well, zoomer humor, which, well, I also really enjoy. I can't really fault the popularity of the Backrooms itself, although I would love to. No, I accept its existence and its rise in popularity, though some of its writing and level design found in the Backrooms wiki is kind of mediocre. It's a good mix of survivor horror and some aspects of liminality. I guess you could say my biggest gripe with it is the fact that entities exist. Now, I don't think all of them are a problem or that they shouldn't exist. It's that most of them are pretty mediocre, and they take away from the liminal horror, which I think is a horror that is really, really underappreciated and misunderstood. Both liminal spaces and the Backrooms exist separately. Although the Backrooms do have liminal spaces, it doesn't do it justice. What do I mean by this? I mean that the presence of monsters or entities distracts you from the dead end that is liminal horror. If a hound or a smiler is chasing you, you stop thinking of your surroundings and instead either flee or fight. And you, knowing of these creatures, will only make you fear them instead of the unapologetic liminal horror. If you don't believe me, then answer me this. What would be the worst way to die? Getting run down by hounds and being ripped apart, or slowly driven insane by the loneliness, the isolation, the lack of food, water, and the constant noises you may hear, until finally it cements in your head that you are truly never getting out of this space and that you are forever doomed to wander barely surviving and forever looking for an exit. F in a sense is liberating, especially in the Backrooms. This frees you from experiencing anything anymore. No more joy or sadness or horror, just nothing. Being forced to live in such a hostile environment that slowly tortures you, very much so by your own survival instinct and your natural will to survive, is rather ironic. Once you stop being yourself, once you stop dreaming, thinking, and hoping, well, You can count yourself as dead, but not quite, because the backrooms or liminal horror isn't done with you.